great alternatives to Dior Sauvage. This is for someone who wants something with Dior Sauvage vibes but not Sauvage. All of these Sauvage alternatives smell great, some are very affordable men's fragrances, some are quite similar to this but with a twist, and some are a bit different, but I do feel those that are a bit different are great alternatives to Sauvage. Before we go into the alternatives, let's take a quick look at what Sauvage smells like. So this to me is basically all about an intense, spicy and citrusy kick in the opening. So this is intensely fresh in the opening. Then you get a really nice dose of lavender, and then in comes what to me is sort of the biggest part of the Sauvage sort of DNA, the ambroxan. So the ambroxan in here basically gives this sort of a nuanced dose of freshness together with a bit of woodiness and amberness. So Dior Sauvage EdT to me is basically all about a big dose of freshness. You get a really nice dose of lavender, and it's a bit woody, ambery and musky. The ambroxan in Dior Sauvage is really what makes it what it is. Sauvage is a versatile men's fragrance that you can use throughout the year to pretty much any occasion, and I do feel that all of these alternatives are as versatile as the Sauvage. Let's move on to the first alternative. This is Sauvage Eau de Parfum, and Sauvage Eau de Parfum to me is basically almost as spicy and sort of a citrusy fresh as the original, but that spicy and citrusy freshness of it definitely feels a lot smoother. Sauvage Eau de Parfum, much like the original Eau de Toilette, also has quite a prominent dose of ambroxan, but I do feel they dial down the intensity of that ambroxan, making this even smoother than the Eau de Toilette, and instead dialed up the lavender. So these two definitely has some similarities, but I do feel Sauvage, the Eau de Parfum, feels more sort of a nuanced, a bit sort of a richer and more interesting, and I also feel without a single doubt that Sauvage Eau de Parfum is a smoother version of the Eau de Toilette, and I definitely prefer it over the OG. The performance is almost on the same level as the OG, but I do feel the Eau de Parfum maybe actually lasts a bit longer. Sauvage Eau de Parfum is definitely as versatile as the OG Eau de Toilette, but I actually feel that the Eau de Parfum, since it's a smoother and in a way sort of a more exciting version of the Eau de Toilette, is a bit more versatile. The Eau de Parfum is a bit more expensive, so you can find this for around 130 bucks, whereas the OG Eau de Toilette usually can be found around 120. Sauvage Eau de Parfum is without a single doubt a great alternative to the OG Eau de Toilette. So next up we have Prada's take on that Dior Sauvage DNA, and these two are actually quite similar. So Prada Luna Rossa Carbon also has a spicy and citrusy kick in the opening. It also has a dose of lavender, and it also has quite a prominent dose of ambroxan. However, there are some clear differences. I do feel they dial down the intensity of that citrusy and spicy kick in Carbon. I also feel they made the freshness of Carbon slightly more sort of a nuanced and a bit more exciting. They also amped up the lavender in Luna Rossa Carbon, and I do feel that the ambroxan in Luna Rossa Carbon is not as in your face as it is in the Eau de Toilette. So in a way, Luna Rossa Carbon could be described as quite similar to the EDT, Sauvage EDT, but definitely a lot smoother, with a more nuanced dose of freshness and with a more intense and gorgeous dose of lavender. One clear difference is the performance, and I do feel Luna Rossa Carbon does not have the loudness and intensity of the Eau de Toilette, but I don't feel the performance of it is weak. It's sort of a slightly above average. Big difference in price though. Luna Rossa Carbon can usually be found, at least on discounters, for around 75 bucks for 100 ml, whereas Sauvage Eau de Toilette is around 120. When it comes to versatility, I do feel Luna Rossa Carbon is as versatile as Sauvage Eau de Toilette, and Carbon is definitely a men's fragrance you can use throughout the year to pretty much any occasion. So the next alternative is Armaf Club de Nuit Urban Man Elixir. There's definitely a bit of difference, even though I do feel these two are quite similar. So one clear difference if I compare these two is that I do feel Urban Man Elixir goes a lot smoother than the EDT, than Sauvage EDT. This also amps up the amberiness of it all. So this is basically a mix of spicy and citrusy freshness. That spicy and citrusy freshness is definitely not as loud and as in your face as that in Sauvage. It's definitely also woody and musky and ambery like Sauvage Eau de Toilette, but like I previously said, I do feel they sort of amped up the amberiness in this, but dialed down the woodiness. And I also feel they amped up the musk in Urban Man Elixir. And in a way, Urban Man Elixir, at least to me, is almost like the perfect mix of Sauvage EdT, Sauvage Eau de Parfum with just a hint of Creed Aventus in it. The performance is definitely really good. I do feel these sort of performs in a sort of a similar way. However, Sauvage, the OG, might have just a bit better projection. When it comes to versatility, Urban Man Elixir is definitely as versatile as Sauvage, the EDT, perhaps even more so. This is a fragrance you can use throughout the year to pretty much any occasion. Price though, a big difference. Urban Man Elixir around 40 bucks, sometimes even cheaper, whereas the OG Sauvage Eau de Toilette is 120. Moving on to another very affordable alternative to Dior Sauvage, this is Cool Water. But before you say anything, this is very, at least to my nose, very different compared to the OG Cool Water Eau de Toilette. The OG Cool Water Eau de Toilette is, at least to me, an okay scent. It doesn't smell bad in any way, and I know it's the favorite of many, but I actually prefer and think Cool Water Parfum is the better one. So this actually has, without having ambroxan, has quite a lot of similarities to Sauvage Eau de Toilette. I definitely prefer Cool Water Parfum over the OG Eau de Toilette. The OG Eau de Toilette does not have Sauvage vibes, but this one has. Cool Water Parfum is also a mix of spicy and citrusy freshness. This one, however, has a slightly different kind of spicy and citrusy freshness if you compare it to Sauvage. And I also feel that the spicy and citrusy freshness of it is definitely nowhere near as intense and as in your face as Sauvage is. This also has vetiver in it, and I do feel it's probably the vetiver in Cool Water Parfum that gives it together with the freshness, that gives it Sauvage vibes. There's one big difference though, and that is that Cool Water Parfum has sandalwood in the dry down, which makes this a lot more woody and a lot, at least in the dry down, a lot less fresh than Sauvage. And a key difference, at least to me, is that Cool Water Parfum goes a lot quicker from that sort of initial dose of freshness to the more woody dry down, whereas Sauvage EdT stays a lot more intensely fresh for a lot longer. So this definitely has Dior Sauvage vibes, but it's also a bit different in when it comes to the intensity. This is more woody. It doesn't last as long. This is about average when it comes to performance. When it comes to versatility, Davidoff Cool Water Parfum is definitely as versatile as Sauvage Eau de Toilette, and this is another one that you can use throughout the year to pretty much any occasion. When it comes to price though, there's a massive difference here. 120 and this for around 40. Cool Water Parfum is so underrated though. Moving on to Versace's take on Dior Sauvage, and this definitely has Sauvage vibes to it. This also has quite a prominent dose of citrusy and spicy freshness. It also has quite a prominent dose of ambroxan, and it's basically that trio that gives me quite strong Dior Sauvage vibes. However, this, even though it has similarities to Dior Sauvage, it definitely goes in its own direction. This has violet leaf, saffron and innocence in it. And that trio definitely takes Versace Dylan Blue in a different direction. But with that said, Versace Dylan Blue, much like Dior Sauvage, is basically a mix of freshness, woodiness and musk, and this is quite ambery. But I also feel that Dylan Blue in a way has a more nuanced dose of freshness to it, and this definitely has a lot more layers to it, and I also feel this is a bit sort of a richer kind of scent to the, in a way, sort of a more simple but more intense Sauvage. Dylan Blue is also, without a single doubt, a lot smoother. Now I know some get beast mode performance from Dylan Blue, but on my skin, Dylan Blue actually does not perform as sort of strongly and intensely as Sauvage. So this to me is a bit above average, sort of going into something that's strong but not quite. When it comes to versatility, you can definitely use Versace Dylan Blue throughout the year to pretty much any occasion. When it comes to price though, quite a big difference. Dylan Blue somewhere around $60 on discounters, $120 for Sauvage. It's very hard to go wrong with a scent like Dylan Blue. The next alternative to Dior Sauvage is going to be a men's fragrance I feel doesn't really have that many sort of similarities to Dior Sauvage, but I really gotta talk about it because I do feel that even though it's not a similar scent, it's a great alternative to it. It's basically a mix of freshness, a woodiness with quite a prominent sort of fruity touch, and it's also a bit ambery, but definitely not as ambery as Sauvage. The freshness of it is definitely not as intense as Sauvage's freshness, and the freshness of it is definitely also quite different. So this to me has more of an aromatic kind of freshness if you compare it to Sauvage. Its fruity touch is absolutely gorgeous. Another quite big difference is that I do feel this is a lot more sort of a sweet if you compare it to Sauvage, which I really don't feel is a sweet fragrance. This is absolutely gorgeous. This is YSL Y EDP Performance. Now, if you're a subscriber, which you are, come on, hit that subscribe right now. Then you know how much I love Y EDP Performance. This to me is definitely one of the best, most versatile men's fragrances in the world. It's also one of my absolute favorite fragrances for sort of everyday use. This is basically a mix of aromatic freshness together with a bit of woodiness. It has a gorgeous dose of fruitiness and sweetness, and it's a bit ambery. An absolutely fantastic alternative to Dior Sauvage, even though these two are not the same. The performance of YSL Y EDP Performance is definitely quite good. However, I do feel it's slightly below the performance of Sauvage. Y EDP Performance is definitely as versatile, perhaps even more versatile than Sauvage Eau de Toilette. So you can definitely use YSL Y EDP Performance throughout the year to pretty much any occasion. This is, without a single doubt, one of my absolute favorites for everyday use. When it comes to price though, actually not a big difference. YSL fragrances are rarely cheap. So when this goes for $120, this goes for $110. So there you go, some great alternatives to Dior Sauvage. Now I would absolutely love to know if you tried any of them and how you feel about them. Let me know in the comments, drop a like and subscribe for more. Make sure you check out my other videos over there, especially my Dior Sauvage review, and I'll see you in the next one.